A very good morning to you, Eldrin, and to our viewers at home. Of course, the Gauteng provincial government, since the announcement of that 2023 budget, has been working with various sectors within the public space and the private space to try by all means to ensure that that budget finds a meaning. Today, the various stakeholders have come together under the same roof to try and solicit ideas and just talk about how that budget can work through the private partnership and public partnership to try and ensure that at least the Gauteng residents get the best out of that 493 billion rand budget that was presented by the Finance MEC. We are told here, Eldrin, that out of that budget, 1.2 billion rand will go through just projects. Those projects will be around ensuring that they attend to the energy crisis that the country is battling right now. Of course, most of the small businesses and those in the business fraternity and the sector have been looking to the government to try by all means to come through with solutions. So the government has come through with those solutions through the Gauteng Infrastructure Agency, financing agency, GIFA, that has been set up by the department to try and work with the private entities to make sure that the projects come through to help with the energy crisis that we find ourselves in as we speak right now. But I'm going to bring into the conversation now, Eldrin, the Finance MEC here in Gauteng, Mr. Jacob Mamabolo, who's leading this roundtable here today. Of course, just trying to solicit ideas from the private sector just on the importance of ensuring that the private and public sector partnership come through for the Gauteng residents. Welcome to the SABC, sir. Tell us, how important is it that we foster and just ensure that there are concerted efforts toward finding solutions to the energy crisis?
Well, firstly, let me say good morning and thank you for the opportunity. Today we are meeting here, we're working with the Development Bank of Southern Africa, DBSA, and of course ourselves as the Gauteng Provincial Treasury with the private sector stakeholders to look at how we can form partnerships and leverage what we call public-private finance blending, which means basically combining the money that government can provide and that from the private sector, all that put together to address in the short term the energy supply problem, but also plant the seed for medium to long-term sustainable solutions. And as you know, out of our total budget as the provincial government, we are already taking the lead in that 1.2 billion rands just in this financial year that has started will be deployed into making sure that we resolve the energy challenges that we're having. So Gauteng is the economic hub of the country. So it is very important for us that we go out of our way to reach out, to talk to have conversations with the private sector. And we're very pleased that a bank like DBSA, which promotes development finance, is working with us to make sure that we can mobilize as much as possible to make sure that we can, build the economy of this province, which contribute 35% to GDP. That is critical for job creation. That is difficult. That is very important, to make sure that we can solve the problems that are facing households, that are facing industry, different sectors in the private sector itself, but also ourselves as government. So we have also, in addition to outlining how the 1.2 billion of the provincial government will be utilized, we are also giving feedback on the projects that we are running. One of them, a game changer, a very important initiative in the West Rand, working with the Merafo municipality, with the mining community. We are putting a huge solar farm, which will then see 800 megawatts coming into the grid. And we are at a very critical point now in finalizing the supply chain processes, allocating the land provided by the mining to the 6 independent power producers. So to that extent, we are very much pleased that Gauteng province, as the economic hub of the country, is already taken the lead. 1.2 billion rands there to make sure that we can build this economy, we can build our country and help the people of not just Gauteng, but the whole of the country.
I mean, this also coming through MEC at a time when there's the Township Economic Development Act that is at play here in Gauteng, where a lot of businesses from the township space are looking towards a government and the private sector, that partnership to ensure that that act finds a meaning. What are the private sector delegates here telling you about that TIDA, that act, and is it some act that they are welcoming that is going to help them as well in terms of investing into those projects that you've set up as Gauteng?
The feedback we are getting from here, from the participants here and the panelists and the people, what the people are saying is it is very exciting to see that Gauteng province has put already in place an act that seeks to make sure that we thrive, we lead township economy empowerment. We know that most of the small, medium, micro enterprises and cooperatives, particularly of women, of youth, of people with disability, they are found in the townships. And when you support township entrepreneurs and enterprises, that's the best way to create jobs. So this 1.2 billion rands, we have also said, and this is also coming out of these conversations, that we must avoid a situation where these monies that we are putting, they support, imports through containers, whilst we're not creating sustainable local production. So the two concepts that I got here, one which at best I can call avoiding containerization of the solutions that we're putting in place, that's just bringing in containers. We need localization, which means creating productive capacity in the province, in the townships. So we are making a call on two fronts. One is we need the private sector to work with us through blended financing to make sure that we can attend to the problem that we faced of energy supply. But attended to that is, again, partnerships, private sector, more township entrepreneurs taking advantage of the capacity of the sun that we have in this province to make sure that they can also participate directly as beneficiaries, as entrepreneurs in the opportunities that are created by things like rooftop solar panels that we're going to put on the government buildings in Gauteng, the solar farms in Mirafong, but also we want to explore working with the city of Tshwane to make sure that one of their power stations in Anamanskraal, which is underutilized, can be brought into the grid. We want to look at Kelvin power stations right here, which is running by a private sector concessionaire. We can also work with them. So in all these things, combined private-public funding, in all these things, localization, and it is important for entrepreneurs to take advantage of these opportunities to make sure that they can put their startups, their existing initiatives in the green smart solution space. And we will also, as part of this 1.2 billion, we want moving forward, working with DBSA, working with other financial institutions. We are seeing banks are also starting to introduce green finance. So we also want to work with them to make sure that in what is called the just energy transition, we also have green finance, which must go again into the township. So our 1.2 billion for the first time, unprecedented, seeks to exactly make sure that local empowerment, solving the energy problem, but also local industries and local businesses.
Just finally on my end, MEC as well, we've seen that there are projects from as far back as 2016 that have been introduced through Gauteng, and some of those projects have not found meaning, and there is also a concern around corruption. As we're mentioning issues of the 1.2 billion rand, there are red tapes that have been cited by some businesses locally, and there is a concern around corruption. How are we going to ensure that some of these concerns are attended to, and we don't find all of these opportunistic elements then hijacking some of the efforts that you've put together as Gauteng working with the private sector?
As a province, the very first thing to mention is we have had an experience that when you put money into new initiatives, yes, there can be a risk of that money finding itself into things that it shouldn't that way it's not supposed to go to. In other words, corrupt activities. We have made sure. Just last week, as an example, we were in Soweto. We met with all, CFOs, heads of supply chain. The Premier was there. We were consolidating and strengthening our capacity to make sure that we prevent corruption. So that is one of the top issues. We're also strengthening our supply chain technology to make sure that we can be able to see real life what's going on. Premier Lisufi last week said, we must not allocate projects and then there's corruption. Then we go and investigate. He made a very profound challenge and said, before projects are awarded, we must do a pre-award audit, which seeks to make sure that we do not have the challenges that we have had before. So the issue of preventing, in a very proactive way, closing the taps, the leaking taps of corruption, that is being attended to. That's the first issue. The second point is that we know that in overall our country has challenges with projects, high impact infrastructure projects being delayed. So one of the things we have seen here from our agency, which is GIFA, is we are applying a very robust tool called Infrastructure Project Readiness Matrix. It was outlined here. One of the things that we want to do through the Readiness Matrix is to make sure before projects are initiated, are things like land in place. Already in the Mirafon Solar Project, 1,500 hectares of land have been made available by the mining community. The second issue, are there environmental threats and risks to this project which can cause it to delay? We are already talking to the Department of Economic Development in the project to make sure that the issues of environment compliance and environmental risks are dealt with. So funding, is it enough? Is it adequate? The regulatory environment. So the issue that I'm making is we have had our own experience as a province of the projects that goes back and forth, that are delayed, that are caught up in red tape, municipal red tape as well. So those issues, we are addressing them through a readiness matrix tool. Does it mean we're going to press buttons and it's all lights and all problems are solved? No. We must also concede in high strategic infrastructure projects, there are difficulties, there are challenges. We must concede that point. We mustn't create an impression that it's just going to be free flow, smooth sail. No. But at least we're putting a robust tool in place, and we are also going to make sure that if a project does not meet readiness criteria, if it does not comply with readiness metrics, that project should not be put in the Gauteng legislature to vote for it because the money will not be spent. So to that extent, we are hard at work making sure that we don't announce projects that people will even forget that there was such a project mentioned. So we are pleased that with the rooftop solar project, we are at a finalization of the supply chain process, and that is a very critical step. We have ticked the boxes. So I just want to assure the residents of Gauteng that we have learned our lessons and we are working very hard to improve. There's a principle called continuous improvement. We're confident we'll get it right.
Gauteng Finance MEC Jacob Mamabolo, thank you very much, sir, for your time. It's coming through there to just give us a sense of the work that they are doing as the Gauteng province, of course, working to ensure that they attend to the energy crisis to help small businesses and business formation that have been crying to an economy that has not been moving. Remember that Gauteng contributes to about 35% into the country's GDP. Very, very important. So they're looking to ensuring that that 1.2 billion rand finance finds meaning through projects working with, of course, the private sector. Back to you in studio, Eldrin.